Так, ну все, выкалываю YouTube онлайн.
Что?
Онлайн.
Здравствуйте. Здравствуйте, друзья. Сегодня у нас большой вечер для UiPath разработчиков. Сейчас через несколько минут, через 2 минуты уже начнется вебинар, посвященный интеграциям программных роботов с различными направлениями искусственного интеллекта. Я вас всех приглашаю посмотреть этот часовой вебинар, а дальше у нас будет очень интересное мероприятие в рамках нашей Академии RPA-разработчиков. Это будет митап, ну, то есть такие практические занятия, наверное, даже лучше, наверное, назвать мастер-классом, где ведущие практики, допустим, ведущий разработчик из «Газпром нефти» будет давать всевозможные лайфхаки пользования фреймворками, платформы UiPath. Это будет продолжаться в течение 3 вечеров. Сегодня у нас будет 2 часа, завтра в четверг 2 часа мы будем, потом будет дано домашнее задание, и, соответственно, на следующей неделе будет еще 1 вечер, мы будем эти домашние задания проверять. То есть на нашем сервере в Академии соберутся ведущие разработчики нашей страны. Это, в принципе, люди, которые от ведущих интеграторов, команды ведущих интеграторов. Это будут представлены большие компании, такие как Сбербанк, Почта Технологи, другие банки. Ну, короче говоря, приветственное слово будет от официального лица платформы UiPath Илья Кочетова. То есть на самом деле мы начинаем наше мероприятие. Давайте переключаться на вебинар, посвященный роботизации и искусственному интеллекту. Михаил, есть эфир, да?
Да.
Digital transformation has failed to take off because it hasn't removed the endless mundane work we all hate. Automation can solve that by taking on repetitive tasks for us. Unleash your potential. UiPath. Reboot work.
I have my point. My whatever. The only thing makes me nervous is not remembering. But I don't care about time. I don't care about the
Ladies and gentlemen, silence your phones, muzzle your dogs, and settle those kids in front of a screen. It's time for UiPath Live from our home studios somewhere on the east coast of the United States. Here are your hosts, Diego Lamanto and Mary Tetlow.
Hello, and welcome. Welcome to UiPath Live. We're your hosts. I'm Mary Tetlow. I head up Global Brand Experience at UiPath.
And I'm Diego Lamanto. I head up product marketing at UiPath. And Mary, it's great to see you again. We're back at it.
We're back at it. Yep, this is UiPath Live. UiPath Live is a 1-hour live broadcast that we bring quarterly to you, our audience, to bring you all things automation, AI, RPA, digital transformation. We are visited by some of the world's savviest automation experts, including our own UiPath product experts. Typically, we broadcast from our studio in New York City, but since the pandemic, Diego and I have been in our home offices, in our home studios, broadcasting, and we're getting pretty used to it.
Yeah, it's nice to be back in the home studio.
Yeah, it'll be good to see you out of the box one day.
Yeah, we'll get back to live broadcasts hopefully soon. Things are looking better, right?
Oh, yeah. So today's episode of UiPath Live is called the Fully Automated Enterprise. Diego, what do we mean by that?
Yeah, Mary. Fully automated enterprise represents the vision that we see a lot of our most progressed customers moving towards. And what we mean by that is really the fully optimized automated enterprise. It's the perfect blend of people and robots in the workforce. And so it's really about how to bring people and robots together in the best way to make your business more effective, efficient, and service your customers best.
That's right. And so that's what we're covering today. We're actually going to cover the 4 pillars of the fully automated enterprise. Let's have a look at those. The show is going to track along with these. We're first going to talk about assigning automatable work to robots. And we're going to cover that with a really great author named Ravin Jesuthasan, who's written a book called Reinventing Jobs, or co-authored that book. And he presents a framework for knowing what to automate, for figuring out what is automatable and where should we start and where should we focus. So moving into pillars 2 and 3, our next segment is going to be the fully automated enterprise provides a robot for every person, and the fully automated enterprise democratizes development. And so we're going to talk about how the fully automated enterprise provides a robot alongside every knowledge worker and enables those knowledge workers to automate, create their own automations. And Diego's going to have something pretty interesting to share with us in this segment as well.
Yeah, Mary, we're going to get the whiteboard out. We're going to get the marker, and I'm going to share how we're seeing adoption scaling once again in the most advanced programs, and we've seen really a common adoption pattern emerge, and it's something that really lends itself really nicely to whiteboarding. So we're gonna do that. It'll be a fun segment.
Yes, it will, and that will be followed by a great conversation with a very experienced practitioner, Kevin Crone from PwC, he's going to guide us through how they are providing a robot for every person and democratizing development at PwC. So that's going to be terrific. And then we'll move into the final pillar of the fully automated enterprise, unleash AI across every facet of work. We'll be joined by UiPath product experts, Bhavna Mathur and PD Singh, who are going to help us understand sort of how AI is being used in the enterprise today, how AI can help enterprises understand what to automate, and how AI can help make automation smarter. So lots of good conversations coming up. Speaking of which, Diego, speaking of conversations, I know you've been out in the field. You've been talking to a lot of our customers, virtually, I guess, and analysts. So what are you hearing from them? What is their take on the fully automated enterprise?
Yeah, Mary, it's been a while since we did the last show. I think we did It's Time to Automate over the summer, and then we had the Reboot Work Festival. And even the Reboot Work Festival is 4 months ago. This industry moves so fast. So much happens. A month is a year in automation today. And what we've seen is as automation is accelerating, and companies are investing more and more in automation, there's a lot more attention on it, and there's a lot more talk about it out there. And I've seen 2 ways of thinking about automation, 2 primary ways of thinking about automation emerge. And unfortunately, I think you hear one view, and then the other view, you don't hear a combination of the 2. And I think we have to start combining. So view number 1 is all about personal task automation. We talk about a robot for every person. It's the idea that you're going to, put a robot on every person's desktop, and you're going to enable and augment people with robots, which is great. That's a huge part of our story, and a huge part of the fully automated enterprise. The second view that you tend to hear is, big digital transformation, large scale, back office. Let's take the complex processes in the enterprise and look for ways to, where they can be automated and how to do this across multi-departments in multi-use cases, et cetera, et cetera. And you tend to see a vendor talk about one or the other because maybe that's what their specialty is or that's what they know best. I've seen this bifurcation of thinking emerge and become more pronounced over the last couple of months. And I think what we have to start doing is talk more about how these two come together. That's what we talk about when we talk about the fully automated enterprise. We talk about how you do both, how you automate the automatable, right? But you put a robot on the person's desktop and you give them access to automations that are, built for them and that they build themselves. And that you apply AI along the way, at every step of the way, to make the robot smarter, but also figure out what to automate. So you really need to start thinking about how do we bring both of these types of automations together in one comprehensive framework and program, and in a governed and really managed way at scale. So that's what the fully automated enterprise is really about, and that's what we're going to talk a lot about today. One last thing I wanted to mention as well, since this is a live show, to prove it, I can tell you that we're proud to welcome the Cloud Elements company, Cloud Elements, to the UiPath family. You may have heard that we did an acquisition. We announced an acquisition yesterday. Cloud Elements is a great company with a great technology, and they're really going to boost our capabilities around the API layer of automation, right? We're adding over 200 new native integrations to UiPath, right? So depending on how you want to automate and what the use case calls for, whether it's through API or through emulation using traditional RPA approach, we've extended our capabilities through this, great acquisition of a great company that we're excited to work with. So Cloud Elements, welcome to the UiPath family.
Welcome.
Mary, back to you.
Terrific. Thanks a lot, Diego. Hey, Diego, you're going to be geeking out with our first guest. He has a framework.
I love a good framework, Mary. I love a good framework.
We're going to move into our first segment, which is the fully automated enterprise automates the automatable. And we're joined by Ravin Jesuthasan, who is the global leader of transformation services at Mercer and the co-author of Reinventing Jobs. So Ravin, hi, Ravin. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Mary. Hi, Diego. Lovely to be with you.
Hey, Ravin. Hey, Ravin. It's good to talk to you. We're excited about your segment today.
So let's jump right in, Ravin. Just as to give some background to our audience about you, and could you talk a little bit about what got you interested in automation and what drove you to this thesis about understanding what to automate?
Yeah, absolutely, Mary. So I am by training a retreaded finance guy. And the thing that has always gotten me interested is how strategy translates into work and how ultimately it translates into value, economic or otherwise. And so Reinventing Jobs is my third book. And the reason my co-author John Boudreau and I wrote the book was, as Diego was talking about at the outset, we were really frustrated with these binary narratives about the impact of AI and RPA and automation on work. And the thing that many have not fully grasped when they talk about either a dystopian future where automation replaces the work of humans, or a fantastically bright future where our lives are easier, etc., is that reality is probably going to be far more nuanced, and it's probably going to be somewhere in between. And so we wrote Reinventing Jobs because we wanted to demystify for business leaders how automation actually enters the organization and how it can be utilized. And so the thing that was fascinating for us, from both in writing the book as well as the work that I do with the World Economic Forum, was looking at the progression of technology over the last 250 years. In the third industrial revolution, we democratized information. That led to the rapid gains in things like outsourcing and alliances. In this fourth industrial revolution, we're democratizing work. We've seen work being done everywhere and anywhere, particularly in the last year. In this fourth industrial revolution, we're democratizing. In the next revolution, which you guys are at the forefront of, is the democratization of automation. I love the narrative you have around how you position automation, this notion of a robot for every person and the democratization of automation. I really think that that's the next phase. But it comes about from really understanding the work and understanding how you use technology and how you digitalize and how you automate.
Excellent. So Ravin, I think your book was one of the first I read that really laid out, how to select what to automate. And your framework is great. I think it still holds up today. I think it really succinctly helps people think about what tasks in a job process are ripe for automation. So could you talk a little bit about that? I think your first step was determining what's automation compatible. Could you talk a little bit about what makes something automation compatible?
Yeah, Diego, the thing that we found is that it's really important to get beyond the job or beyond the headline workflow, to get into the component tasks and categorize them along the lines of those three continuums we have. Is the work highly repetitive and rules-based versus being sort of highly variable, where new ideas, new work, new concept, new output is being created each time? Is the work physical in nature versus mental in nature? So getting into the deconstruction of those activities and understanding exactly what is the nature of the work and what is the potential automation compatibility. That is step one. And then the next few steps take you through kind of a roadmap of understanding the work and then figuring out the relevant type of automation and its potential role.
Yeah, and Mary, do you mind if I just do a quick follow-up here?
Oh, sure.
So Ravin, I think one of the things that I really liked about the way you broke that out is you looked at a job and you broke it into tasks, and then you looked at what tasks are automatable, right? Not the full job. Just a brief, if you could, because I think that's really important. That's a really important part of an automation strategy. Is not, you're not taking a whole job end to end out. You're taking the tasks out, right? Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely right. Diego, I like to say a job hides all manner of sins, and I think we all know from our jobs there are things that are highly repetitive and rules-based that are often the most frustrating for us. Yeah. Hence the idea of a robot for everyone being very appealing. There are other things that are highly variable that require significant cognitive sort of power, which in fact AI and other technologies could augment by making you that much more productive, helping support information discovery and helping bring the right information, et cetera, to you. So it's essential to get beyond the job if you're going to get to the right, to the optimal outcomes of humans and machines.
Awesome.
Ravin, you in your book, you talk about this ROIP, return on improved performance. Could you talk about how you measure that?
Yeah, Mary, that is probably one of the more pivotal aspects of the framework. In most organizations today, and not today, but for the last 150 years, we have this belief that more performance is better. And what my co-author John and I have learned over all of the work we've done with various organizations, starting with some of John's research and the work we've done with various companies, is that in fact, in every organization, across different bodies of work, there are 4 types of outcomes associated with work. In some instances, you're looking to eliminate errors. Think of the work of an airline pilot or a driller on an oil rig. I don't know about you, Mary and Diego, but we've been landing planes the same way since the Wright brothers. I don't need the pilot of my next plane to get innovative or creative with how he or she lands that aircraft. So error elimination is the objective function. And the role of automation in keeping performance in a very tight and acceptable level. The next sort of variable is where we're looking to minimize variance. No real return to the company once you get to a certain level of performance. So you want to optimize your investment and keep performance in a very narrow zone. So variance minimization being the goal. And then you have a third relationship where there is an incremental relationship between performance and value. Think of a salesperson. Lots and lots of activities that a salesperson does, as the two of you well know, where automation is great at augmenting that person to increase their productivity. And then you see a fourth relationship where small improvement in value yields exponential, small improvement in performance yields exponential value to the organization. Think of highly creative work, data science.
Right.
Think of the work of the folks developing the vaccines. Small improvement in performance, exponential value. So understanding those 4 outcomes is really essential.
That's why I like that, how you break the job down to tasks, right? Because then you could find, take the low value tasks out and let people spend more time on the high value, tasks that have that outsized impact.
Yep. Exactly.
Robin, can you talk a little bit about how you've seen this methodology play out in an organization?
Oh, absolutely, Mary. So in the book, we have about 130 odd examples of organizations in many different industries and how they use automation, how they've started with the work and then achieve the optimal combinations of humans and machines. So one specific example I'll give you is the work of let's say a credit analyst at a bank. Mary, you apply for a mortgage. What does that person do today? That person goes and she, scans your application, verifies your information, cross-checks it against the bank's records, cross-checks it against, data from one of the credit rating agencies, pulls data from the IRS to verify your income, checks your social media activity to ensure you're not engaged in any nefarious activities, and then they engage in sort of the decision making, and then communicating decisions and validating them with others. Much of that upfront piece, the highly repetitive, the rules-based stuff, today, some form of RPA or smart automation can take on. And instead of the person engaging in these mundane activities, which take a lot of time and can often result in errors that have very significant negative consequences for the bank, now you get to automate them, exponentially increasing the speed with which the activity is done, virtually eliminating the errors, and putting the individual into the process of checking, testing, validating the outcomes, stress testing them with other colleagues, providing a much more personal experience for you, the borrower, versus being heads down and trying to process a transaction. I think to me, it's a great example. It's one of many in the book of how automation can really transform some of the work and allow the human experience to be elevated.
Awesome. All right, Robin, so last question for you is, it's been a couple of years since you published the book. I'm sure you've had a lot of conversations with practitioners since then. I'm sure you've been digging more and more into the field. What are you currently working on, researching? What's next for you? I'm excited to pick up your next published work. What's coming down the road?
Yeah, our next book called Work Without Jobs actually will be published by MIT next year. We have a Sloan Management Review article that came out just 2 weeks ago by the same name. And it really, Diego, takes these ideas and advances it into a new operating system for organizations. So we're very excited about it.
Wonderful.
Well, hopefully we'll have to have you visit us again, Robin, to talk about that book in the future. But thank you so much for being here. Yes. And we're going to move on to the next pillar, actually the next 2 pillars of the fully automated enterprise, which are fully automated enterprise provides a robot for every person and democratizes development. And Diego, I know you've put together something for us, something kind of fun and informative.
Yeah. So some animation coming your way. Mary, I'm really excited to talk about this idea of what we call the automation flywheel. In my travels in the past year, virtually, of course, I've spoken to a lot of customers who are having success with automation and scaling their programs. And when they walk me through what they've done and how they do it, we tend to see a very common adoption pattern emerge that I think would be great to share with the rest of the audience. So I'm going to walk you guys right now through what we call the automation flywheel.
Yeah, fantastic, Diego. It's really it's fun, and it clarifies not only how to get started, but it also will help you understand how to advance your journey along the fully automated enterprise. So, Diego, how does it work?
The flywheel typically starts with some sort of centralized program looking at what are the big opportunities for automation? What are those transformative, highly repetitive processes that we can go out and knock out first and show the value and get ROI from, right? Everyone has heard, well, if you're in the automation in this space, you've heard about invoice processing because it's really a great first step for many companies. So you got a center of excellence who's looking for those opportunities. They'll pick something like invoice processing and then they'll start that automation process. So automations get deployed. Some of them are just in the back office, don't touch any employees. They just kind of get done. But some of them have an employee component, right? There's an interaction between the human and the robot. We've talked about this. This is a really big part of automation is that how do people and automations work together? And many automations are just a task within a human's or a person's job. And so they deploy the automations in a tended manner where the people will engage with that automation in some way, shape, or form, right? So maybe, the employee kicks off the invoice process or they have to review each step or look at exceptions, right? And so people will engage with their automations through something like UiPath Assistant. And so that's how the programs get started, through these low-hanging fruit. Now, what's good about this is that when you start to deploy automations and people start working with automations, people start to actually understand automations better. When you just tell people automation's coming and you're going to have some part of your job automated, it's probably scary for people. And we hear that over and over. And we understand the anxiety around that. That's a normal human reaction. But when they get hands-on and they see that, oh, it's a task in my job and my job is not, automated, what happens is people start to actually become more comfortable. They start to understand better what automation can do for them. And they actually start to have ideas for automations themselves. This is where it becomes really interesting. I remember vividly a conversation I had with a CIO who told me, we rolled out a couple of automations and people were scared at first. And then by the end of the first week where we rolled out our first automations, I had 47 suggestions in my inboxes for new ideas. Because people are like, hey, you got rid of that part of my job that I hated. What about this part of my job that is not worth my time? Can you automate that for me? And so you get this flywheel going of automation where it starts centrally and it continues with these central projects, but the people start to feed ideas into the COE and you get this momentum that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise if you don't get people involved. So it's really important to get your people understanding automation, and the best way to do that is to let them get hands-on with it. And so that's the first gear of the flywheel. And then something interesting happens. We call this a breakthrough moment that supercharges the flywheel. What ends up happening is that people start to not only suggest ideas for automations, but they actually will start to actually build their own automations, right? So let's say you're in marketing. I know that space so well. And your center of excellence gives you an AdWords robot. And you say, that AdWords robot is awesome. Everyone in the marketing department's using it now. But I, every day, spend time gathering reports and I hate it. Could I have a robot to do that? And maybe the center of excellence is too low on their priority. They can't get to it yet. But you can build it yourself using low-code tools like StudioX. So people start to build their own automations and they start to actually get personal productivity. They save themselves time and they start to build out and scale automation in a personal way. This is a huge component of the automation flywheel. When you start to get people not only comfortable enough to suggest automations, but to build their own automations, you have a whole nother gear of the automation flywheel that is impossible to get in a top-down way. Now, of course, this involves governance, right? So they need to submit the automations to the center of excellence, and the center of excellence needs to apply the right rules around it, make sure that they're not accessing off-limit applications, make sure that the security credentials are all managed appropriately. That's all part of the program. And that's all built into the flywheel. But the key thing here is to get the people using automations so that they understand automation well enough that they start to build their own automations. And what you'll find is that often that turns into an automation that does get rolled out across the whole employee base. We've seen automations built by people inside the departments that are just automation users that no one expected. get rolled out to thousands and thousands of employees because it was a useful automation. So let's say that report robot, you know what? The whole marketing department could use that report robot. Well, Bob built it, and we're going to deploy it to another 150 people that could use it every day, and they're going to save a half hour every day. And so that's how you get the automation flywheel going. And when you do that, you start to see, higher productivity, happier customers, and happier employees. There are a couple of more accelerators to the automation flywheel that I think are worth mentioning here. First off, AI is a fantastic element to add into your automation program. Not only do you want to make your robots smarter so they can handle more sophisticated use cases, that expands the flywheel, but you also want to enable AI to help you figure out what to automate. So through tools like process and task mining, AI can tell you, hey, here's some ideas for automation. And then in terms of building your automations, you want to use a marketplace, an automation marketplace for the common components that you don't need to build over and over again. And you want to use APIs where they're available, right? So if an API exists into a common application, by all means, use that to accelerate the speed of development. And that's the automation flywheel in a nutshell. Last thing to add is that the UiPath platform powers and accelerates the automation flywheel. I'm not going to spend another hour going through how every step of the way our products can help you. I could, though. In reality, the UiPath platform helps you every step of the way. In step 1 in building automations, our Studio family is there for you. In step 3, our UiPath Assistant is how humans engage with automations. In step 4, that's where the automation hub is where they suggest ideas. And then Studio X is how they build their own automations up there in 4B. And so every step of the way, UiPath products are there to help you deploy this flywheel. But this flywheel is really the center of how to scale automation successfully inside your enterprise in a way that really, really drives a lot of value and excitement in the company. And so that is the automation flywheel in a nutshell.
Diego, thank you so much for putting that together. I love it. And I think it clarifies the whole automation journey, and it makes it tangible, which is really important for so many out of our audience and people who really want to understand it. So it's terrific. Thanks.
Awesome. That's based on what is actually happening out there with our customers. So thank them.
Well, that's a great segue into our next segment, which is we're going to talk to a customer now who is a very experienced practitioner, both of providing a robot for every person and democratizing development. We'd like to welcome to the show Kevin Crone, who is the Intelligent Automation Leader Partner at PwC. Welcome, Kevin. It's great to see you today.
Hey, Kevin.
Thanks for being here. So, Kevin, I just mentioned PwC is a real pioneer in automation, and you've been doing this since the early days. So what drove the initial motivation for PwC's digital transformation?
Sure. So rewinding the clock back maybe 4 years ago, as we were going through the starts of our own transformation, we looked at this from kind of two lenses. One lens was kind of big investments in the center that we could make. And we, at the time had been implementing Salesforce and Workday and doing some big kind of, system, called big systems implementation work. But as we looked at what I'll term the client service aspect of our business, PwC is one of the world's largest professional services firms. We have 3 primary lines of business: assurance, tax, and advisory. As we looked at the challenge of digitizing that business, we really had to think differently about this, because we knew kind of upfront if we tried doing this from a top-down perspective, we would be at it for the next 100 years. And we knew that if we didn't think creatively about the types of tools that would be appropriate for automating processes in terms of our client service, it would be a big challenge to do this from a kind of single big technology platform implementation. That led to the creation of what we call our Year Tomorrow program, which was really aimed at hitting a couple of goals. One was to think about how we deliver better value and better insights to our clients in a more digitally enabled manner at a lower cost. Sounds fairly basic, but that was really the guidepost for how we thought about our transformation. From that, the big concept that we really drove home and embedded was we have to have our workforce play a major role in that transformation for two purposes. One, those are the individuals that know the business the best and know what they do, and being able to actually use them as our biggest weapons was going to create an advantage. The second part was from a change management perspective and how we viewed operating the business in the long run. Unless we started to embed skills of the future into our workforce, we didn't think we were serving our employees well and not setting them up for success in the future, whether it's at PwC or elsewhere.
Right. So, Kevin, you saw the flywheel that Diego took us through. Did you do something similar to that at PwC, or how did you get automation to take off with your employees at PwC?
Yeah, so part of, maybe I'll get to the question in a second, but just to give some context on how we actually got automation to our employees. Part of the citizen-led concept, and again, we started this in 2017 when I think no one understood what the heck we were talking about when we would put out that concept, was really around providing upskilling to all of our employees. So in the US, it's 55,000 employees. And we looked at this kind of from two levels. One was a baseline level of knowledge on all things digital, RPA being one of those things. But the goal was really to give people the ability to recognize where technology could help solve a problem and understand how technology would change their day-to-day work. And then we then offered a second level of upskilling, which was to actually get hands-on experience in using tools and have access to those tools. So part of that hands-on experience was just making UiPath available to our workforce in its entirety and giving them the appropriate training. So for those that had the capacity to actually participate, they would get the chance to build. It was interesting as I was watching the automation flywheel piece. I would say, our program, from Diego's kind of beginning parts, didn't necessarily start as a COE where the COE was basically going out and getting ideas from the entire workforce and building solutions, and we eventually added citizen-led on. In our case, our original kind of COE within PwC was focused mostly on a small portion of our back office functions. As we really looked towards client service, we actually started with the citizen-led piece before kind of getting into the professional development. And the idea was twofold. We assumed, and I think this proved out from the experience, most of the solutions that are going to be developed by citizens who are probably not technologists by trade generally tend to be smaller task level automations. Effective, yes, and in some cases we had some very effective solutions built, but it wasn't necessarily going to create in itself the major transformation bit. But I think the really interesting part that we saw was by creating an ecosystem where you have that center still very active and not just governing solutions that are created, but actually studying the solutions that are created and understanding where people's pain points are. It's actually giving the inspiration and the process intelligence that you need to actually create the more center-led type solutions and some of the more complicated end-to-end solutions, which may involve AI, may involve other technologies that are embedded. So you could almost think of it, from our side, it was kind of the citizens drove the COE versus the COE kind of matured and then drove the citizens.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's what we love to see, where the citizens are now driving the CEO. I think a couple things to unpack from that is, you guys were so early. I think before COEs really knew what we knew a COE was going to look like. You've been doing this for such a long time that I think you guys are the pioneers in many, many, many ways around the whole journey. Something that you said, I want to pick up on. You talked about you sort of combined upskilling and future-proofing employee skills with automation. And, that convergence is really interesting to me. Could you talk a little bit about that and what the benefits have been for PwC in converging those two initiatives?
Sure. It's interesting, and just like throwing out, maybe I'll take this from a market perspective for a second, because I think some of the stats are really interesting. Our own CEO survey that goes out every year, stats that have come from the World Economic Forum, from other sources, show a couple of consistent themes when we're talking kind of top of the house. One is the increasing gap between skills that exist in organizations today and the view of what skills are needed in the future to be productive in one's job. And the fact that most CEOs don't feel like they're making much progress from an upskilling perspective, and investments in this area have generally been either underinvested or money's been invested in the wrong way. I think that was a theme we recognized early on as we were setting out the strategy for this program. On the face of it, our goal was to reinvent how we deliver work and think about how we could deliver more value with less resources, right? And think about how our business kind of goes from a business that in professional services that's historically measured on pure people to a people and technology business. That sounds basic again, but that was a major cultural shift for us. In order to get there and actually realize that, we knew that the employee piece was going to be really important because we needed to really make them part of this journey. And the only way we were going to get there was really by focusing on upskilling. I think the piece that really, at least for me, resonated, our senior partner, who's our CEO for the US, he talks about the concept of leave no person behind. And we made a commitment to our workforce that if you wanted to lean in and get the training, we would make this available for you. And that was important because it gave people a purpose for why this was important. It was important both to the success of the company, to the success of their jobs, and to the success of their future career, again, whether it's with us or elsewhere. And I think that's been a huge success factor for us because it really kind of got people excited, and taking someone who maybe is an accountant and has a background in finance and saying, no, it's important that you're learning RPA, data analytics, visualization, other tools, is kind of change people's thoughts on what their career could look like long term. And so all that's happening while we're trying to think about how do we pump out as many automations as possible that are ultimately going to have the benefit of digitizing the business. If I compare and contrast that quickly with some of our clients, I think you constantly have change management challenges with people fearing their jobs are at risk from automation. And I think this is one of the ways in which you get over that.
So speaking of your clients, Kevin, how are you using all this learning that you've acquired inside of PwC? How do you bring that to your clients? How are you helping them?
So, as we've gone on this journey, we've learned a lot over the past couple of years. There's some things we did right. There's some things that we probably would have done differently had we been starting from scratch. But one of the things that we've really undertaken is an effort to rationalize all those learnings and all the infrastructure we built around that. And PwC is actually going to market, partnering with our friends at UiPath and others with a platform called ProEdge, which is really meant to help clients enable their citizen-led journey, both from a learning and digital asset scaling perspective. And I think it's important, and I think it's a bit of a mind shift for a lot of our clients as you're looking at the question about how you scale an automation program and who needs to be at the table for that conversation. When you're bringing the upskilling topic and that purpose around filling the skills gap to the surface, it's bringing probably a different crowd on the client side than maybe the person who typically runs the automation COE. You're getting into kind of overall business transformation leaders, CHRO, people strategy leaders, others in the organization who are all trying to crack this question. And we think it's a really good way in how to kind of bring the nitty gritty of what we love to talk about with automation to the C-level strategy and surface.
Yeah, what you're doing with ProEdge is really impressive, and I think your clients are benefiting from your early days in pioneering in the space. So it's awesome, and it's great to be partnered on that. Kevin, we're just about out of time, but last question, real quick: if you were to go back a couple of years in the past and you got to talk to your past self, what's the one piece of advice that you would give yourself, knowing what you know now?
There's obviously a lot that could be covered in there, but I would, from my perspective, cracking the upskilling challenge and how you actually do that, and there's different facets to it. What type of learning? How are you delivering the learning? How are you segmenting the workforce into how you would sequence this? It's hard to hit kind of everyone at once. What are the different personas? And then how are you rewarding people and how are you measuring what people are doing over the long run? Making that kind of the primary focus. I think it's, as automation practitioners, it's very easy to get caught up in the nitty gritty around, okay, how do I manage 50,000 bot runners, and how do I, what's the governance and all these other questions that are important. But I think getting that people part right kind of makes everything else kind of happen naturally.
I love it. Your advice was around the people, not the technology. That's really, really illuminating.
Yeah, that is.
Awesome. Great.
Well, we have, the time has just flown. Like my favorite dad says, time flies whether you're having fun or not. And I was having fun, so it really flew. Thanks a lot, Kevin. It's great to see you again.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the fourth pillar of the fully automated enterprise, which is unleash AI across every aspect of work. And for this segment, we are joined by UiPath product experts who are going to help us understand how to use AI in the enterprise, how AI can help you make your automation smarter, how it can help you understand what to automate. So joining us today are UiPath experts, Bhavna Mathur, who is a VP of Product Management at UiPath, and PD Singh, who is the VP of AI Products at UiPath. Welcome to UiPath Live, guys. It's good to see you.
Guys.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
And PD, we're going to start with you. This pillar is called Unleash AI across every aspect of work. What does that mean?
Yeah, thanks for having me. As we look at all the different stages where you can employ automation in an enterprise, right? Our platform, we believe, is one of the few ones where you can target any stage of maturity, right? You can start by applying AI right at the discover stage. Bhavna is going to talk more about, using task mining. It actually uses AI to infer and deduce these patterns of frequent use. But then as you start building your robots and you want to include more cognitive skills in those robots, we have things like document understanding. We have things like, computer vision to understand, all the different surfaces where you're interacting with for building your automations. We also have, conversational understanding components, but also you can bring in, your custom machine learning skills and, machine learning skills from our partners. So that's when you started building, your robots. And then as you start thinking of scaling and managing these AI models, we have the AI Center, and we have components which let you do the human in the loop pretty easily. So that's what we mean by the whole life cycle inclusion of AI in different stages. Also, we apply AI across any surface, front end apps, RDP, virtualized environments. But also we've seen if you take this from an industry angle and you'll start looking at the different use cases. So we've seen customers in healthcare, retail, financial services, professional services, doing everything from in healthcare things like readmission prediction to patient receivable management. In retail, everything from inventory management to price optimization. In financial services, fraud detection to KYC. And that's what we mean by applying AI across all the different facets of automation, verticals, and horizontal use cases. That's what we mean.
Right. So it really supercharges our automation, right? It makes your robots smarter. Forgive the simplistic term, but it gives them more, more of those cognitive capabilities to handle, maybe some uncertainty or make decisions, and expands the number of use cases, which is awesome. But I think the other way we see AI being applied to automation is literally in helping you determine what to automate. So, Bhavna, could you talk a little bit about how companies are using AI to determine what to automate?
Yeah. So at UiPath, we have the most developed discovery platform, and this is because it's powered by artificial intelligence. We are the market leader in process discovery and artificial intelligence. What we find in our customers is that there's a vast proliferation of and variation in how enterprises perform processes, and inherently processes tend not to be perfect. And so our discovery products help our customers get to the right process, both at the enterprise level for end-to-end processes such as order to cash, procure to pay, but also at the individual user level as it relates to repetitive tasks that they perform. We have the best training data since we have massive customers with large volumes of data, and we use this to train our models. Artificial intelligence for us is really about helping our customers figure out where robots can help people best, and defining what people should be doing.
So, Bhavna, at the top of the show, Diego talked a lot about sort of the ways people are thinking about automation. And he talked about automation as personal productivity tool, and then this big A automation, which is transformational automation. Could you go a little into some detail about what products do we have that help determine what to automate?
Mary, I'm really glad you said products because it's not one product or two products, but it's a whole suite of products. It's a platform, which is what we offer. Our customers have different personas performing different processes, and we want to use the power of our end-to-end platform to help them define and implement sort of that ideal automated process, if you will. And that journey, as I mentioned, travels from the enterprise, discovering, defining, and optimizing enterprise processes, all the way to the individual and the repetitive tasks that they perform. So perhaps I can show you a quick visual here. So this is process mining. Process mining helps you visualize end-to-end enterprise processes and identify bottlenecks depicted in the dark blue color here, dark blue boxes. And what you can do from process mining is submit an idea to Automation Hub for automation. What we then send over to are details about the end-to-end process, the specific bottlenecked activity, and what is really significant is the users who perform that activity. Because what you can then do from within Automation Hub is kick off a task mining study by inviting some of those users to identify the various traces of that bottlenecked activity, identify the most common trace, curate it, and automate that step within Studio.
Awesome. And so, could we just see task mining as well for a second there? I think we have yeah. Could you walk through what we're looking at here on the screen, Bhavna?
Yeah. So this is basically identifying for a specific activity the different traces. And what is highlighted in red is the most common trace, and you can kind of zone in on that and automate it within Studio, and then have that be available, that robot be available to the end user performing that task, so that they can leverage the power of automation, and you can rinse and repeat that whole step of